Have you ever wondered whether the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place?
Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your hosts Brian Berneman and Kayla Greenville, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world.
We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers.
From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and for this episode I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Kansas City in the US by Claire Crum. Thank you, Claire, so much for taking the time to be here with us and for sharing this space and conversation with me. And for everyone that is listening, could you share a little bit about who Claire is?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. And so I'm excited to be here and sharing with you and your audience. My background 15 plus years ago is in the nonprofit sector here in the US. So I worked for several grassroots organizations. The first job that I ever had was in an organization where there were 1.5 employees and I was the half. So I really understand when founders and CEOs are coming in with, all of the hats on. And over the years, my journey has evolved into the work that I do now, which is working with primarily social enterprise organizations and nonprofits with my team to help them in an operational support capacity. So we work with them to optimize their operations so that they can make a bigger impact with the resources that they already have. And that's a big piece because I think that intention and simplicity are something that, we all need a little bit more of in this life. And I think that that's probably something that you guys talk a lot about here.
Yes, definitely. Would you mind sharing, Claire, a little bit about why that space? Like, what for you is important around that space that made you work in there and support those that work in that space?
Absolutely. I just always had a heart for missions and doing work that makes a difference. That's something that really, it gets me up in the morning. And so, my work in the past has been with individual organizations, but, the choice to serve entrepreneurial impact makers and nonprofit organizations now is to really spread the good that we can do. So my team and I like to say that we want to help all the do-gooders do more good. And it's exponential when we work with a variety of folks that are serving multiple missions. I have a large respect for neurodiversity. I think that a lot of different people look at the world and problems and solutions in different ways. And when we can come together and use our gifts and talents to serve the folks that are creating these amazing visions, then that's how we get to move mountains. And that's really exciting.
Yes, it's like, a lot of times I say there's the people that are doing something specific, and then there's the people that help those people do that specific thing as well, and that support that. And I think that, and I would love to know a little bit more on your experience, but when there's nonprofit organizations or small organizations that are trying to do good, there is this big, I don't know if it's a dilemma, but this big thing that is, we want to do this big mission and we have this, like this vision on how to do it. And then there's we live in a capitalist world, we need money and we need resources. So, how do you see that in this space, especially for new organizations, and the importance of being driven by their mission and to understand as well what's the role of resources?
Yep, absolutely. So your mission, along with your vision and your value statement, are really the compass rose that you have that will direct you with all other decision-making opportunities that you have. Anything that you take on should be measured by that mission, vision, and values statement. So, the mission is your public statement. It's what you put out into the world to say, this is what we are here to do, what we're excited about. It's what brings cheerleaders to your organization and brings that support and passion to help you to reach the vision that you have. And, wrapped up in there, we're wanting to live by a certain set of values. We want to operate in that way as well. So, that's what success looks like, right? That's point B, but where we're at is point A. And so from, when we have those 2 points figured out, now we can start to line up the dominoes to say, what are the steps that it's going to take for us to reach success, which is what we're stating in our mission and vision statements.
And, I see, of course, here in New Zealand, but I've seen this in every place that I live. There's so many nonprofit organizations. There's so many charities. There's so many organizations that are trying to do good. And at the same time, because of the fact that there's so many of them, and because a lot of them are quite small, there's a lack of resources, because of course, like a lot of non-for-profits, the way that they work is they get funding from governments or different places, depending of course on each organization. But because there's so many as well, it's hard to tap into that. And of course, then how do we manage those resources? Do you see in that space that there's a lack of experience sometimes, that a lot of these organizations are not using the resources as efficiently as they could, just because of being small and new?
Yes, I think that particularly in that space, people lead with passion, which is amazing. But sometimes what that does is it actually puts blinders on us to the ways that we can accomplish the missions that we have set out to create. And so, there's multiple ways to do lots of things, right? And so as a startup, that means that there's multiple options for how you can succeed. And that might look like partnering with an existing organization, because funding can be harder to come by. And so, partnering in that way can help still to further the mission of what you want to do, but it can open up different ways in which you can do that. So, certainly you need to come at things in a creative way. You need to have people on your team who think about things differently than you. You don't want to be surrounded by everyone saying the same things. You want to be able to challenge a little bit, because that is going to breed innovation. And on the same token, I think that it's amazing and important that we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are picking up these social causes as well with their for-profit businesses. I think that that's going to be a really important role as we move forward too. It's going to take really everybody, all the sectors, working to make a difference in this world in all of the causes. And so it's really about everybody working together and being creative about how we can make those impacts that we want to make.
Yes, I have with this space, I because I've volunteered for many years with a lot of different causes, and I think one of the main things for me, which has always been interesting, is the fact that we actually need those organizations. Shows how our system is flawed. Like, if we actually need so many organizations doing all of that, if we need, as an example, and I think that this is much more common in the US than in other countries, but if we need for every person to create or give a little campaign to be able to pay for their medical bills or things like that, it's like, well, there's something wrong with our system. If we required all of these people to actually create an organization just to be able to, put a band-aid somewhere, then what's what's at the root of all of that? And I always thought, like, we need to do it because that's our reality, and at the same time, how can we go beyond it and try to create a change so that we as an organization become obsolete?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think that a big role for organizations is to talk about things on a deeper level, to bring that educational element. I think that that is just as much an important piece as the actual work that itself, the funding opportunities for your constituents. Absolutely, that's important. But let's talk about why we have to do that so that more people are educated and we can start to make change. But that's going to come from a larger conversation.
And what do you see in terms of the space of funding? I've seen, as an example, I've seen a lot of organizations that they basically function with grants from government as well as through donations. And for me, that could potentially be not a great framework to have, because you're always thinking, I can only survive if people want to donate to this specific organization. And I've seen a lot of new organizations that are starting to pop up more like social enterprises, where they do have that mission and they do have that vision, and they, in a sense, are operating like a for-profit organization. They are selling something, or like whichever method they're using to generate the money that actually is going to go into their cause, instead of thinking that they need to rely on donations.
Yes. So I would say that, from an operational perspective, it's going to be more sustainable for there to be multiple streams, right? And not relying on just grants or just donations, those kinds of things. And that goes back to being creative and looking at all of your options when you're starting an organization or starting a mechanism to be able to help in the way that you want to help. There's multiple ways that you can come at that, whether that is as a for-profit or a nonprofit organization. They're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. And, for a nonprofit organization, I think it's important to remember that that's a tax status, but you have just the same amount of operations and marketing and visibility work to do that a for-profit business does. And so, it's important not to neglect some of those operational pieces that business owners are coached to pay attention to. But, unfortunately, sometimes we see nonprofit organizations who are pressured so much to put out programming that they don't have the capacity to take on some of the operational pieces. And that ultimately handicaps them because they get to a point where they can't grow as an organization without having some of those operational foundations in place. And that's what we strive to help organizations do, is to kind of move past that cap. But that's certainly an important piece for sustainability across the board.
And would you be able to expand a little bit more on that, which is the aspect that you help them with? Like, what are some of those like barriers, as well as what are you doing to be able to help them move past them?
Yes. So my company, Calm Ops, is really somewhat of a bridge. We strive to work in parallel with the organizations that we come into to be some ancillary operations support to move them to the next level for their organization. And so that can look like a couple of different things. We do strategic planning in a very tactical way so that the CEO, the executive director are on, they have a plan with their team that they can utilize so that they absolutely know that they are on target with day-to-day tasks, knowing that those are going to help them move the needle towards the mission that they are working towards in this given year. We also work with them a lot with process. And so, when there's just one or two people, a lot of times information lives in your brain, and then it comes time to bring in new team members, but it lives in people's brain. And so you don't have time to stop and train those people, or you bring them on anyway. And now it's a baptism by fire situation, which is not the best work environment for a team member to come into. And so in those situations, we help them map out all of the systems and processes that they need to get the job done. How is it that you do? What is going to be needed differently to be able to move to the next level? We literally map all of that out, kind of unravel the spaghetti brain or mental post-it notes, if you will. And then we go in and help document all of those things so that they have this amazing training resource that is available to future team members, current team members, and it becomes a really sustainable foundation for literally all of the things that they need to do to get the job done with their organization.
Yeah, I remember I used to work this organization, and when I went in, there were almost no processes. Like it was literally like, how do I do this? And we needed to actually get in contact with a previous volunteer that they weren't anymore working there. And it took a lot of time to be able to get there. And I remember that we started to create the systems and documentation for everything. And when I ended up leaving, we were still working on that. And I actually remember I didn't have time to pass on my knowledge just because I moved country, and there were still a lot of gaps. And I was thinking like, oh my God, like the next person, like they are going to come in and they will have all of these gaps of operations, and they don't have access to me just because I literally left. And I thought, like there's so much importance of being able to do that, because I know it even now with my own business. There's a lot of things that are just in my head.
All of us have that. All of us.
Yeah, and of course there are things that in my business where it is now and the way that it operates, those things are okay for them just to be in my brain. But if I would be thinking potentially of like hiring someone to become the director instead of me, then all of that actually I would need to start documenting all of that, and that takes a lot of time.
It does, and it handicaps an organization. So if you think about your example, this person that followed you, they're starting from scratch now, and so all of that it's not just the knowledge that's lost, but it's a lot of time that's lost. And so by having those pieces in place, it really helps to make the organization more effective, because volunteers there's turnover with volunteers. That's the nature of that work. And so we can help to mitigate some of the stress that comes with that. We can utilize them better so that they're more prepared and have a better experience volunteering with the organization, which means that they're going to want to continue to volunteer with the organization. So, this is a supportive document, and it really speaks to the culture of the organization too. Why do we do the things that we do? Is there a way in which we do them that speaks to our values, right? If we're communicating those kinds of things to our teams as well, that increases that positive community culture that we want to feel on our teams, because again, that's going to breed innovation and camaraderie and loyalty and all of the great things that you want to have on teams all start with supporting them well. And this is one way that you can do that.
Yeah, and based on the things that you were just saying, I want to ask you two things. One is around stress and people, but first I want to go to another question, and this is actually, I was working earlier today with one of my clients and talking about his business, And we were talking about what you shared just now about the values and that why, and for every team member to understand what are the values of the business. Because and what I was telling him as well, we were working through was, what are the values of the organization? Not your values as the founder and as the leader. What the business, if someone can personify that business or organization, it's like, oh, these are the values. So then everybody knows, okay, like this is the framework. What do you see in that space in terms of how many of these organizations that you work with know all of those values and the culture that they want to create internally, not only externally?
I would say not enough. I think that it's starting to become more well-known, and organizations are starting to understand the importance of articulating that. I think sometimes it lives, again, maybe even in the brain of the founders or the leaders of a business or organization, but it needs to be a continuing conversation, right? Have it as your Zoom background. If you have meetings, put it up in your office, whatever you need to do. That is something that should be out there for everyone, because it's the why, right? And as humans, we resonate with that. We want to know that we're making a difference, particularly if you have individuals that are choosing to work for a social enterprise or nonprofit organization. There's somebody that's really driven by the work and making a difference. And so it's really important to communicate that to them and feel that within the team culture.
Yeah. So I'm going back to the other question that I had around stress, especially for those that are running these organizations. A, what have you seen and experienced with that? And B, is that something as well that you're supporting with?
Yes. So Calm Ops is the name of my business for a reason. I don't think that stress and burnout are a requirement of running a business or an organization. I think that it's common, but I don't think that one must beget the other. And I think that a lot of that comes from really identifying and being intentional with how you move in the world, frankly. So when we work with organizations, particularly in strategic planning, strategic mapping is what we call it, we go back to the mission, vision, and values again, because then we can say, all right, how are you operating right now? Is one of your company values to be sustainable? Well, how is taking on all of these things that you don't actually have space to hold? How does that feel very sustainable? Well, probably not. So let's dive in there and let's make some shifts. And we talk through all of those pieces. And again, when you know exactly where it is you're going and where you're at right now, you can get really clear on the things that need to happen, the milestones, the objectives, and then you can target your actions and tasks to those milestones and objectives. And when you can amplify your work in that way, you can get that focus and that targeted, you can make an exponentially bigger impact in the work that you do without all of the extra superfluous burnout that comes from not having a plan or just, feeling disorganized, flying by the seat of your pants.
Yeah. And, I think because this is one of the spaces that I work a lot with people, and the fact that burnout and stress has been so normalized, and it's not normal. Like it's not natural, and it's not.
I'm with you.
It's not a sustainable way of operating. And I think that this is one of the key things that our society, and slowly I think that it's changing, but the fact that sustainability hasn't been seen as well from the human aspect of what's sustainable for the people working in every position in an organization, and understanding the tension that comes with like actually being productive and efficient and all of the things that the output that we need to create, with understanding like, okay, like there's a human here, and is this sustainable, as you're saying? Is this sustainable? Is sustainable for the person to be able to get this without getting to that place of stress, without getting to that place of burnout? Because that is not sustainable and that is not okay. And I think that the more that we can operate from a place of understanding this is not normal, we can make a change. Because as long as we normalize it, then we're not going to do anything. I see this a lot with the people and in the spaces that I work with, that they are chronically stressed. And because they see that that's how everybody else is, then they keep on going into that space of complete stress until someone completely burns out. But it's been so normalized also that that is part of it, then they are okay with that. And all of my work is about preventing that, and about being able to get them to see this is not normal. This is actually like really effed up. This is actually, you know, like the fact that this is okay, and that you can see to the left and you can see to the right, and it's like we're all stressed in this office. It's like, how is that okay?
Yeah, and I would say in some instances, you know, here in the US, I know it's not just normalized, it's celebrated in a lot of circles, to be taking on so much that it's leading to burnout. You know, it's a badge of honor. And the thing, it's not just a detriment to us as humans, absolutely. But, you know, think of the work that you're trying to do. It's a disservice to the impact that you're trying to make. And so if you want to make the biggest impression on, you know, the team that you have, the investors, the constituents, you need to come at that from a place of sustainability, whether that is in funding or in resources. All, you know, you have to consider all of the resources, and some of those are the individuals and the energy and capacity that they have. One of the things that I, you know, talk about with the individuals that I'm working with is that emotions are data, right? How you're feeling in the work that you're doing tells you something about how to move forward. If you're feeling in that place of burnout and stress and I can't go any further, let's dig into that, because there's a why that we need to explore. And when we can look at that in a deeper way, we can start to analyze and understand how we need to move differently. How do we operate differently to prevent that feeling? Or what feels really great about the work that we're doing? Why? Let's amplify that. And those are the kind of pieces that are maybe not the most common when it comes to strategic planning, but resources in any sense of the word need to be considered.
Yeah, and you know, I think that it's really interesting because the human resources, it's actually a lot of times not taking into consideration that there's a human, and as well, like one of the things that I share a lot is around the fact that if someone wants to be of service, which most people that are either volunteering or that are working for an organization, a non-for-profit organization that is focused on a specific cause, we are people that we want to be of service to others. And one of the things that I always say is, if I am not well, I am not going to be able to do well for others, or I'm not going to have as much capacity to actually give. It's the same as I always use the airplane, like always put your mask first on and then support the other one. Because if you're burnt out, if you are stressed, then that's also what you're giving to others. And from, you know, like an energetic perspective, that's what the other ones are receiving. Or we can say it from an emotional perspective. It's not the same receiving something or having an interaction with someone that is stressed than with someone that is not. It's not the same being able to be well and to share that than to be completely burned out and to share whatever is left in the tank. So the more that we end up changing the focus on that, I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And as leaders, we're modeling that, right? So, if we're in a constant state of stress and burnout, then, we can't give as well to our teams, but we're also participating in that normalization of that. And so, that's an unreasonable expectation for people to live up to. And, to meet these amazing visions that we have in social enterprise and nonprofit organizations, we need people, we need human capacity. And, from my background in volunteer management, these people are giving their time to you. And how do you reward them? Right? It's the same with employees of an organization or business. They have a choice to be there and help you. So how do you support them in doing the work? And a lot of that is, just as you're saying, it starts with the leader. You have to go internal and have some self-awareness around what's going on so that you can show up as your best self for your team.
Definitely. What, Claire, would be some tips that you have for someone that is, like starting a new organization, like some things that you say, these are musts?
Well, the 3 keys that everyone needs is to clearly identify what their mission is, what their vision is, and what their value statement is. So that's where everybody needs to start, right? As I mentioned before, mission is more of a public statement, your intention, what it is you are doing with your organization. A vision is a little bit more internal. That can be a little bit more data driven. We want to reach X number of people with this campaign. We want to be in this place in 5 years from now, those kinds of tactical numbers. And the values, as we've talked about, are, not just, oftentimes they mirror your internal personal values, but what are the values of the organization? And, be really clear on those, because every other opportunity, every other plan that you are starting with for this new organization all need to be measured by those initial statements. Because if they don't match up there, then it's probably not worth your time and effort. And you want to be the most effective that you can within the resources that you have. So what does your time allow? What does your energy allow? How many team members do you have supporting you? You need to be really effective with that time. And you can do that by being really targeted with the actions that you take.
Beautiful. And do you know, Claire, beyond what you're doing, which we'll get a little bit more into that, but are there some good resources on like some books or like podcast or some resource or website that you think that would be really beneficial for those that are starting?
Oh, so many. Well, this is an excellent podcast. Most definitely, everybody should be tuning into all of the episodes for sure. Another podcast that I really enjoy is the We Are for Good podcast. They are, talking a lot about nonprofits, social enterprise, and what that looks like now, because there's a lot of old school that comes with those sectors, and they're really exploring all of the different creative and modern options and what's going on and what's exciting in those sectors. So that is a really great resource. Another book that I really love is called Do Less by Kate Northrup. It is admittedly geared toward feminine individuals, but it talks a lot about how to, go internal and think about what you need and what you have capacity for, and how to move forward in a way that is supportive of you as a human. So those are 2 of my favorites right now.
Beautiful. That's wonderful. And so, Claire, for those that potentially are in that space and would like to learn a little bit more about what you're doing and how you're operating, what are the things that they need to be aware of, and and how they can actually connect with you?
Absolutely. So definitely come and check out the website, clairecrum.com. I actually have a freebie for folks if they're in that space where they're trying to identify those key statements, mission, vision, values. You can go to clairecrum.com/3 keys. And I have a little workbook to help you go through and identify those pieces. And certainly look me up on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. And I would love to chat with folks and just, see what you're doing. What's the cool stuff that everybody's putting out in the world?
Beautiful. Beautiful. And we'll have those links as well in the show notes so that everybody can find it with ease. So if you're listening and you're resonating with this and you would like to know more, go and check out those 3 keys, and hopefully that will help you. And if you're in a place that, as Claire was just saying, that you feel like you want to connect with her and reach out and potentially work with her, connect with her, whether that is on LinkedIn or through her website. So thanks, Claire, so much for taking the time, for sharing, and for actually doing the work that you're doing, supporting those that are doing so much good for the world.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the work that you're doing in bringing voice to all these important topics.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Claire, once more. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And we'll see you, everyone, on the next episode. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.